Anyway. Okay, gentlemen. Erev Shabbat Shalom. Parshat Vayishlach. So I do want to say a very important idea that I always felt was, I feel like it's very important to know this, even though these concepts we already know of, and it's always good to review. It's always good to constantly drill this into our heads, especially because it's very important for Parashat Shavua. We learn out a tremendous lesson, and I think it's a lesson that has to be repeated over and over again as long as we can, and kind of like make sure that us and our children know it more than anybody else. Just to begin off as a way of introduction, I want to talk a little bit about the episode of Yaakov Avinu fighting with the Sar Shel Eisav, which we know the Gemara tells us was actually an angel, right? It was the Samech Mem. It was the Angel of Eisav, the Satan himself, Samech Mem. And he writes over there, he says that if you think about it, Yaakov Avinu, he's the quintessential tzaddik. He's the Bichir Sheba Avot, as they call him. He's the choices of the fathers. So seemingly, if anybody deserved to have a peaceful and good life, it would be Yaakov. And even though we know at the end of the episode, at the end of this battle, this boxing match between Yaakov and the angel, we know that Yaakov Avinu does win. Even though he doesn't kill Eisav, he doesn't kill the Angel of Eisav, but if you walk away from fighting from an angel and you walk away, that's considered as if you won. But we know that at the end of the episode that Eisav actually, the Sar Shel Eisav, he gives a hit, he gives a blow to Yaakov, and he gives him in the Gidan Hashem, in the thigh. And Yaakov, he walks away limping. So there are two questions on the sugya. A, does Yaakov Avinu deserve to walk away limping? And B, which really I didn't understand until maybe now, is that you see that Eisav has a negative attitude towards Yaakov. Obviously, he took the brachot and he had this chip on his shoulder. And for the next 20 years, Eisav is planning to kill Yaakov. That's what he's doing. That's his plan. And then all of a sudden, when they actually do meet in the very beginning of Parashah, you see that Eisav was kind of sort of happy to see him, at least at the first on the surface, the first time you analyze the Pesukim, it seems that Eisav is sort of happy to see Yaakov. And it always bothered me, like, why is that so? Like, what changed? Yaakov Avinu, he's preparing to meet his brother. He's preparing for war. We see that Yaakov prepared for war. And all of a sudden he sees Eisav, the behavior of Eisav towards Yaakov is not of somebody who couldn't wait the past 20 years to kill his brother. And the question is, what changed? What happened? So therefore, A, does Yaakov Avinu, does he deserve to walk away limping? And B, what happened to the attitude of Eisav? Why did it change? And the Torah doesn't tell us what changed. All we know is that Eisav wants to kill Yaakov, and then all of a sudden, we see that Yaakov prepares for war, and then when he meets Eisav, his attitude is, just fine. Lovey-dovey. And exactly what happened, what changed. So the answer is, and this comes from Rabbi Al-Karif Sefer, Sasbir Matecha, he asks this question. He says, A, does Yaakov deserve to walk away limping? And he doesn't ask the question of Eisav, that's kind of my question, but through his answer, you could see that this answer answers why Eisav seemed to be lovey-dovey, what exactly changed. And he brings from a sefer called Levush Kohen. And he says, Sinato ha'azah shel Eisav, the sin'ah, the hatred that Eisav had towards Yaakov, nav'ah mikach sheYaakov lakach lo et ha'bechorah. He came because Yaakov took away the firstborn rights, vet ha'barachot, and also the blessings. And what do we know from the blessings of the Bechor? What does the Bechor get to do later on when the temple is built? The Bechor was kind of supposed to be the Kohanim. The Kohanim were supposed to be those people that end up doing the service of the korbanot, of the sacrifices, in the temple itself. And therefore, by action, when Yaakov took away the blessings from Eisav, what did he actually do? He took away the right to bring the korbanot in the Beit HaMikdash when the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built. However, we know a law, and the law tells us that if a Kohen Bar Minan, he's considered a Baal Mum. What's a Baal Mum, gentlemen? A Baal Mum is somebody that's considered handicapped. A Kohen that's handicapped cannot bring the korbanot. That's the law. And then all of a sudden, so now Eisav, his hatred stems from the fact that Yaakov Avinu took away the rights to the Bechor, which translates the rights to bring the korbanot, and therefore Eisav felt such a hatred towards him. This man took away my right to bring the korbanot over to God. And all of us, and it says the rabbi called Levush Kohen, mashma'ut netilat bechora hi, the mashma'ut, the implication of taking away this right of firstborn, she'Yaakov hu zeh she'avod bebet hamikdash. Yaakov is going to work as a Kohen in the temple. Sheken habudah hitam b'sorah lebechorim, because now the abudah, the responsibility of the korbanot belongs to the firstborns. V'hem hayu hakohanim hamishratim bebet hamikdash. They were the kohanim that served in the mikdash. Esav pagash et Yaakov. Now when Esav, 20 years later, he meets Yaakov, ura'a oto tzoleya. Now he sees him limping. What does that mean? How does Esav look at the fact that Yaakov is limping? Mm-hmm. He looks at that as a handicap. And now he knows, he goes, oh, turns out the fact that he took my rights of firstborn, he only took it so he could serve in the mikdash. But now that he can't serve in the mikdash, what does that mean? Now the fact that he's handicapped, that means he can't serve in the mikdash. Turns out that his whole plan of taking away my first rights of Bechor was for no reason. Now the fact that Yaakov is now limping, the fact that now he's considered a handicap, that rights that he took away, who's it going to go back to? It's going to go back to me. It's going to go back to the fact that now I'm going to get those rights back. Therefore says Esav, he writes, Esav pagash et Yaakov, hura'a oto tzoleya, v'amar Esav, Esav said to himself, Ma'achar sheYaakov bal mum, now that my brother became a handicap, shuv eno rashai lavod bebeit hamikdash, he cannot serve in the temple anymore. Haveh omer, that means she'avudat ha'keuna v'habrachot shebaot mi'ikivoteiha, the fact that he stole the brachot away from me, tashuv elai, they're going to come back to me. V'im kach, if that's the case, it's pointless for me to fight with my brother because there's no reason to anymore. Miyad vayarotz Esav likrato v'yachakabekehu v'yipol savra v'yeshkehu. Turns out that Yaakov, now Esav, didn't hate Yaakov anymore. He has no reason to hate him anymore because the fact that I hated him was only because he took away the first rights of Bechor. But the whole reason why he wanted the first rights was because to serve in the Mikdash. Now that I see him limping, now he's a handicap, he's a balmum, he can't serve anymore. If that's the case, the responsibility is going to go back to me. Now I have no reason to hate him. Therefore says the rabbi called Levush Kohen, it answers the question, why did Esav change his behavior towards Yaakov? Why after 20 years of this hatred does he want to kill him? And all of a sudden after he sees him, he runs and he hugs him and he kisses him. Well, leave the Mefrashim, Rabbi. I know you know the Mefrashim that says that he wanted to bite him. Leave that for 1 second. Just on the regular interpretation of the pasuk, he ran towards him, he hugged him and he kissed him. That means he had a love towards him. If he had a love towards him, that means what changed? What changed was he was no longer angry at him because he didn't have a reason to. Now that he sees him as a balmum, that means everything went away. Says the rabbi, Hidbarer. It turns out, Shemashi Yaakov niyet soleya. Now you can ask yourself a question. Did Yaakov Bemet deserve to walk away from this fight with Eisav, with this angel of Eisav? Did he deserve to walk away with the limp, with the handicapped? Hayaz elotovaton. Turns out that it was for his good. It was for his benefit. Davka mishum kach Esav lo asa lo klum. It was because he walked away handicapped. It was because he walked away with the limp that it turns out this whole war with Esav was avoided at the end of the day. Mikan musar heskel gadol, says Rabbi El-Kari. From here we learn a tremendous musar. Gam mashinir adli itim kedavar ra. Sometimes we see something that happens to us that's seemingly something negative. Maybe it's going to be at the end, that's the thing that's really going to be positive. Pay attention to the newsletter that we wrote this week. The whole concept of Gamzul Tova means that even though something was meant to us, that it only looks something to be negative, but it turns out at the end of the day, it was really positive. Dafka from over here, it brought the Yeshua. That's where he writes that even though it seemed to be Yaakov that I walked away limping, and he can say to himself, did I deserve to walk away limping? The answer is that because you walked away limping, because you walked away with this handicap, turns out that was the reason why Esav was not able to fight the war with you. Zot ve'od, he writes, Yaakov kitkoneh b'kam ofanim. We see that Yaakov in preparation to fight with this war with Esav, likrat pigishato im Esav, like Rashi writes, hitkin atzmo l'shlosha devarim. He prepared himself 3 ways. He prepared dohon, which are gifts. Tefillah, he prayed, and Melchama, he prayed for war, or he prepared for war. But it turns out that out of the 3 things that Yaakov prepared with Esav, which 3 things saved him? None of them. Yaakov prepared so much in order to save himself with this war, but at the end of the day, where did Yeshua come from? It came from left field. Says Rabbi El-Karif, that's what happens in life. That sometimes we prepare because we know that something is going to happen. So therefore, we take the steps in order to ensure either it happens or it doesn't happen. Chaim, you have to pay attention. But yes, because he was limping. And he says, She'ikar hatztacha lo ba'a b'zchut otam devrim she'Yaakov tichanen. Turns out that the three things that Yaakov prepared for, the prayer ended up being what you could think. Yaakov could say, listen, I prayed to be saved, but at the end of the day, I'm limping. So how does the limp save me? Answer is, you're right. It could have came from there. He writes, it came from something specific, completely different. The fact that God made him as a limp, that's what calmed down Eisav. Now that I see him limping, turns out that he's a handicapped. If he's a handicapped, he can't serve as a kohen that brings the korbanot in the mikdash. So yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. That's from this answer of the Bush going. He's right. The whole reason why he was jealous of him is because he said to himself, the reason why I want the firstborn rights, even though you're right, you could come along and you could say, I could come along and I can answer that the Kohen never had to work a day in his life. I could. The Kohen never had to work a day in his life. Why? Because all the gifts. The Kohen had a tremendous position in the nation. The fact that he never had to work, all the gifts were given to him. He was never poor. He had to be rich from his fellows. So the fact that he was able to get all this, listen, that this is Esav's dream. Esav's dream is to be pampered. Esav's dream is to get gifts, and Esav's dream is never to work a day in his life. That's exactly what the Kohanim that they were. They got gifts, they were pampered, they never had to work a day in their lives. So yes, in a way you could say that Esav was jealous because Yaakov was the Kohen, was the Bechor, and now the fact that he saw that Yaakov became a Baal Mum, listen, I don't have to worry anymore. Now that he's a Baal Mum, the rights of the Kohen are going to come back to me, therefore there's no reason to fight for him. Therefore he writes, it's a tremendous lesson because Yaakov at the same time, he prepared in the three ways. He prepared by preparing gifts, he prepared for war, he prepared in tefillah. Turns out none of those things that helped him. It was something that came out of left field. And he writes that is life, gentlemen. He writes, at the end of the day, he goes, a lot of times people, they prepare in certain ways for a situation to happen or not to happen. And Hashem brings the Yeshua in a completely different form, in a completely different way. There's so many times that happens in business that a guy, even right now with the holidays, someone was telling me that he's a salesman in an electronics store. And he said that he thought that one product specifically was going to be a big hit in his electronics store. So he bought a tremendous amount of product before the holidays, before the shopping day. I heard in the news yesterday that Black Friday and Cyber Monday, it brought over $40 billion in sales. Incredible, tremendous day of shopping. And this guy, he knew the market. He wanted to take advantage, and he knew that a certain product was the product that was hot this season. So he invested a tremendous amount in that product, and turns out, he said, that product didn't even sell. He said the product that really sold, he didn't put any effort in, absolutely nothing, and that was the product that sold mostly in his store. He said it happens to me all the time, that I invest in something, and it turns out that the investment that I made wasn't the investment that wasn't the money that it brought me. It turns out it always comes from left field, even when it comes to ruhaniyut, by the way. Even when it comes to something that's, they say about Moshe Feinstein, Allah Shalom, that he worked all his life on the sefer called Dibrot Moshe. More, you know what that is? Dibrot Moshe is Moshe Feinstein's commentary on Shas. That's what he invested most of his time in. And the truth is, nobody knows of Moshe's sefer called Dibrot Moshe. Igrot Moshe is what everybody knows him. He's known for his halachic books called Igrot Moshe, but he always said that in his life he never put too much time in it. Igrot Moshe was something that he really wrote as that was like a side gig for him. He wrote that at night when he put a couple of minutes into it a day, but that's what became his magnum opus. That's what became his main, his bestseller, as we call it. But his main work, his Dibrot Moshe, is something that he spent all his time in. It's not really something that made him famous. It's Dafka, the work that was on a side. It's Dafka his work that was considered something amazing that people really paid attention to. Yes, Yitzchak.
Why would the absence of Yaakov's before cause Esav to become before and become the Kohen?
So I guess he assumed that. I guess once a person becomes pasul for something, automatically it goes back to the next in line. If you can't do it, so it's going to move on to the next best person.
The rabbi said last week with Reuben.
Yeah. So he writes. So therefore, but so is Eisav. So he figured. So is Eisav. Eisav is the actual before. So therefore he writes that was the main concern of Eisav. And anyway, so anytime we see something that's not that when a person invests something and he sees that maybe the Yeshua will come from here, maybe the Yeshua really comes from left field. I told the story a few weeks ago in Beit Knesset. Maybe Roman, you'll remember the story. I think the story was hysterical. It's okay, you can go get food. So he writes, the story was from Rabbi Zaid. Mordechai listened to the story. Rabbi Zaid tells a story. He said that one time he was walking in Bnei Brak and he sees tremendous commotion by the bus stop. So he says that, in general, when there's commotion by the bus stop, you just keep on walking. But in Bnei Brak, that's the only type of entertainment they have, commotion by the bus stop. So he ran over to see what happened, and there was a girl that was crying hysterically. And he comes up to her, he goes, "Are you okay? What happened?" And she says, and she recognized him. She said, "Rabbi Zaid," he goes, "You never believe what happened." He goes, I was taking the bus from one of the stops to this bus stop, and when I got off the bus is in Israel. Where do they store the luggage? They store the luggage under the bus. They have this door that opens like the coach bus that we have today. The storage compartment in the buses are under the bus. So the bus thing opens. You put your storage inside. You put your luggage inside. It closes. And you get on the bus. That's how it usually goes. So this lady's saying that she put her luggage under the bus, and when the bus stopped, she went to get her luggage. But what happened was there was a lot of turbulence in the bus itself. So the luggage, it went all the way in the back. So she went inside the bus in order to get the luggage, and before she knew it, what did the bus driver do? The bus driver closed the door. And she was very nervous, and the entire time she's screaming, but no one's helping her. No one's helping, and she's screaming, and she's sweating, she's kicking the doors, and nothing is moving. The bus driver keeps on going. And then as she's screaming, she's getting nervous, she's screaming, "Help me out, let me out, let me out, let me out." She notices that she's not the only girl over there. Turns out there's another boy in there also got stuck. But instead of the boy helping her, what does he do? He starts screaming on top of his lungs, "Yihud, this is Yihud." What goes to Yihud? Yihud is the law, the halakha that tells us that a man cannot be locked inside a room with a woman. So this boy got very nervous. He starts screaming, "Get out of here! What are you doing inside here? This is Yihud, get out!" And she's screaming, "What Yihud? My Yihud!" She's sweating. It's 1,000,000,000 degrees under the bus. And this Mishugah is screaming, "Yihud, Yihud." So Rabbi Zaid, he asks her, he goes, "Where's this Mishugah over here?" And she points, she goes, "It's that boy over there." So he goes over to the kid and he says, "Tell me something." He goes, "Are you normal?" He goes, "How could you be screaming, Yuchud, Yuchud? You see the girl, you see that she's getting nervous, you see that instead of calming her down, instead of trying to get her to relax, you scream Yuchud on top of your lungs." And he goes, "Rabbi, what do you want me to do? Halakha, it's Yuchud. I have to follow the law. What do you call this? Is this not Yuchud?" So Rabbi Zaid says, "No, I don't call this Yuchud. I actually call this the first date." So he says, "Rabbi, what are you talking to me?" He goes, "Come. Are you married?" He goes, "No, I'm not married." He goes, "Give me your pratim, give me your specifics." He writes down his specific. He goes back to the girl and he goes, "Give me your specifics and you give me your details." She goes, "Rabbi, what do you want my details?" He goes, "It could be that the Mishugah you got stuck under the bus with, it could be that Mishugah is going to be your husband." So he takes over her details. They went a couple of dates, and B'Simantov they got married. So it says Rabbi Zaid, "Yeah, how'd you meet?" I met under the bus when one time the bus driver closed the door on me. So he says that one. So he goes. Therefore, you see that sometimes a person can pray for the Yeshua. He could be mitkonen. He could prepare himself to have something done in a certain way. He could go on dates. You could search for shidduchim. At the end of the day, what does God bring the Yeshua from? He brings it from left field. Over here, it's a perfect example of Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, he prayed his dohon. He prepared gifts. He prayed to Hashem and he prepared for milchama. At the end of the day, what was it that saved Yaakov? It was this limp that he walked away from Eisav from the Sashel Eisav, because the Sashel Eisav, he attacked him. He gave him this limp on his side. At the end of the day, what brought Yaakov the Yeshua? It came from left field. It came from this limp. That once Eisav saw him limping, he said to himself, "If Yaakov is limping, that means he doesn't deserve the first rights. If he doesn't deserve the first rights, that means really it's going to come back to me. Therefore, I have no reason to fight with Yaakov." Therefore, he writes, it's a lesson. It's a lesson to us that sometimes when a person can think, I'm gonna do this, and maybe the Yeshua will come from here, and God always brings the Yeshua from a different place. Yes, Dave.
The whole fight was for the brachot. He didn't care about the firstborn right. The firstborn right.
So the way Lebush Kohen is saying that be'emet, that was the brachot. The brachot was the firstborn rights, and the firstborn rights is becoming a kohen, and making the sacrifice in the mikdash. So therefore, Esav knew what he was jealous about. Now that he got it back, he had no reason to argue. Anyway, that's one lesson that I thought was incredible. But the main musar of the night is a piece that Rabbi Mutzafi brings down in his sefer called Doresh Tzion, and the truth is he really gets it from the sefer that Rav Elchanan Wasserman wrote. Rav Elchanan Wasserman was one of the students of the Chavetz Chaim, and he really says a tremendous yesod. And he comes along and he says, Rabotai, he says that so we know what happened. The battle. The battle was between the Sar Shel Eisav, which is the Samech Mem, and between Yaakov Avinu. And the question he asks, which is a fundamental question, is why does the Shah Shel Eisav, why does he specifically attack Yaakov Avinu? Zot Omer, that you had two forefathers before him. You had Avraham, you had Yitzchak, but he dafka goes for who? He dafka goes for Yaakov. And the question is, and this is a famous piece by Rabbi Elchanan, so if you hear other rabbis talking about it, that you know that you can't move in Parshat Vayishlach without saying over this Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman. So he asks, and he says, why is it that the Shah Shel Eisav, the Satan, why does he decide to go after specifically Yaakov and not any other of the forefathers? That was the question that he asked. Oh, that's a good question. Did Esav know about the whole fight? It could be that he knew, or even if he didn't know, at least he knew the results, and the results was that he was limping. But back to the question, Rabotai, why does the Shah Shel Eisav decide to attack Yaakov and nobody else? So the yisod that he brings down, again, I think it's honestly fundamental. Meaning what? That he was going to.
The one who's going to carry Am Yisrael.
Okay, fine. I understand that. The yisod that he brings down is as follows. He says that we know that the forefathers, they obviously kept everything as much as they could, but each one of them they exemplified in something specific. As we all know, that we know that Abraham was chesed and Yitzchak was yes, givurah. He was also called avodah. Avodah is tefillah, and Yaakov was Torah. So the Satan, he said to himself that amongst these three options that I have, if I have chesed, I have tefillah, and I have Torah, what is considered the biggest threat to the Satan? What is considered 100%? And if you can look at through the lives of the Avot, you could look at Avraham and how much he contributed. And there's no doubt that chesed of Avraham, it contributed to a tremendous amount of positivity to our nation. Anytime that you see people doing chesed, every time you see people that are kind, and a lot of chesed organizations and benevolence and things like that, you know that it's a direct result of the kindness of Avraham. At the end of the day, who else do you know that after a tremendous surgery goes ahead and he serves three complete strangers, and not only does he serve them, it's not like he gave them a cup of water. He went out of his way, he slaughtered 3 different cows just to give them the tongue, and he even gave them condiments along with it. Who do you know that has a tremendous amount of hachnasat orchim, the amount of guests that he saw in his house? There's not just an exaggeration. The Midrash tells us he literally saw hundreds of thousands of people that went in and out of his home. Even the people that you could think of today that have tremendous amount of chesed in their own homes. I remember when I was learning in Israel, there was one rabbi, he passed away, but his name was Rabbi Machlis. Rabbi Machlis was a rabbi that used to have at least on his table, at least every Shabbat, with no exaggeration, he had between 50 and 60 people by his Shabbat table every single week. His wife used to cook up a tremendous storm, and this rabbi had 50 to 60 people every Shabbat by his home. Where does that come from, Rabotai? What is that chesed? What does it stem from? It stems from Avraham. Even a person like Rabbi Kalatsko in Muncie, New York. I told a story about him a few weeks ago. Rabbi Kalatsko, he could have up to 200 people in his home every Friday night. This is not a one-time thing. This is not a once-in-a-month thing. Rabbi Kalatsko has, his dining room could fit up to 200 people in his home every single Friday night. And that's a tremendous amount of chesed. What's that? Same thing. It's a tremendous amount of chesed, and it's
Isn't that what Chabad does too?
in a certain way, yeah, absolutely. It depends which Chabad you're part of, but yeah, absolutely.
The Chabad in my school, they host ceremony.
Yeah, I'll never forget when I was when I took an NCSY trip to Fort Myers. There was nothing Jewish in Fort Myers. The only thing that's Jewish in Fort Myers is the Chabad over there, and the Chabad has maybe about 20-25 people a Shabbat. And again, what do these people eat? They eat in the rabbi's house. So there's always that one time you could be the biggest Baal Chesed, but there's always that one time where you just want to break. You just want to break. You just want to have Friday night Seudah by yourself, just you, your family. But these people, there's no such thing. For them not to have guests in their home, they can't handle it. The whole week is already thrown off whack because they didn't have any guests by their home, and they teach their children that way. And for them not to have a noisy home on Friday night, that's what Shabbat is. And where does that come from? Where does that tremendous chesed, where does it come from? It comes from Avraham Avinu, because he had this, if you look, there's so many stories about that. I could elaborate from today to tomorrow. What does it mean to have chesed? Right before I came here, I read a story from Rabbi Krohn's book. He said that not only talking about hosting guests, Stam Kacha, a nation of chesed, which is what we are. We are a nation of chesed. He said that one time there was there's a supermarket chain in Israel called Yochananov. You heard of it before? It's a huge supermarket chain. It's kind of like Bingo. Yeah, it's kind of like Bingo, but it's called Yochananov. And this supermarket chain in a place called Ramat HaSharon. It was right before Shabbat, and there was a storm that Friday. And the storm was so bad that like 2 hours before Shabbat, all of a sudden there was a blackout in Yochananov supermarket, and there was about 100 people that were there. And now, what to do? Because people need food for Shabbat at the same time, but the cash registers are not working. They don't even open. So the manager had three choices. Choice A, he could tell people, listen, go somewhere else, put down your stuff, go somewhere else. But he said, if I do that, it could be that A, they're not going to find anywhere else. B, it could be that they're going to be so late into Shabbat, some of them even might break Shabbat. So he said he didn't want to tell them, go somewhere else. The other option was just to tell people, listen, put all the stuff down and just good luck. I'm not responsible. It's not my responsibility, and that's it. But the third option, he said, was that he told everybody, whatever you have in your carts, bag it up, take it home, and just after Shabbat, make a calculation and come to pay me afterwards. He said that he chose the third option, he said, and even amongst the non-religious, even amongst the secular, he writes, he said that whatever he did, it caught the attention of one of the Israeli news outlets, and they printed a huge expose on this manager of the Yochananov supermarket chain. He said it made a tremendous kiddush Hashem of how much chesed this guy decided to do, that he just gave everybody, 100 people filled with shopping carts. I can't imagine how much money that he was expecting to lose. But he said that Sunday when they reopened, 70% of people paid their bills, and by that next Friday, he said, all the accounts were considered closed. Therefore, he said the amount of, first of all, you see yashar, you see how honest the Jewish people are. Besides that, he said, but the tremendous chesed that goes on, and that all stems from who? It stems from Avraham Avinu. That amount of chesed that he put inside the DNA of Am Yisrael, that only comes from him. But at the same time, after all that being said, after all that chesed that he did, the Satan said, I'm not threatened by Avraham. Why? Because you could have, the chesed is not exclusive to who? To Am Yisrael. You also have goyim that do plenty of chesed. There's plenty of soup kitchens the goyim have. There's plenty of hospitals the goyim, they donate their money and they invest their money. Chesed is not exclusive to Am Yisrael. And therefore said the Satan, if I have a choice to attack Avraham, I don't have to. Why? Because I'm not threatened by his chesed. Yes, chesed is great. You have to be a kind person. But chesed does not keep the Jewish nation running. Therefore, he said, I'm not going to attack Avraham because I'm not threatened by Avraham. Huh? What threatens the Satan?
What keeps the nation running?
I'm getting to it slowly. I'm trying to build hype. Yitzchak also, again, Yitzchak represents Avodah, which is tefillah. And we know that Jewish people have a tremendous connection with tefillah, with our prayer. But at the same time, the Satan, he doesn't feel threatened by tefillah. You could pray all day long. You could sit in synagogue and you could pray, you could read Tehillim, you could pray 9 times a day. But the Satan doesn't feel threatened by tefillah. And the proof doesn't feel threatened by tefillah because there's so many synagogues that have opened up and they have closed because all they did in that synagogue was pray. A nation cannot continue to perpetuate. A nation cannot be a nation just by prayer alone. I'll never forget that a few years ago, I took a trip with my wife to a place called Newport, Long Island. Not Long Island, but Rhode Island. Newport, Rhode Island. What, you ever been there to Newport, Rhode Island? It's a beautiful place, but besides that, there is one thing to do, Chaim. There's one thing to do. It's the oldest synagogue in America is in Newport, Rhode Island, or it's a Sephardic synagogue, by the way. In 1658, the Spanish Portuguese, they came from a place called Barbados. You know Barbados, Chaim? They came from Barbados, yeah, and they came over there and they opened up. It's by the way, we're talking about George Washington. In fact, they have a letter from George Washington that he wrote to this synagogue. The first, or true, that's not really the first. The first synagogue was the Spanish Portuguese synagogue in the city in Manhattan, She'erit Israel. It's still around today. So that synagogue was the first synagogue, but this one is the second synagogue ever to be opened up in America. And they have a letter from George Washington. Today, Rabotai, do you know what this synagogue is? I think it's called the Two Rose Synagogue. Yeah, it is. It's called Two Rose Synagogue, correct? I remember. So nowadays, what is it? It's just a tourist site. They don't hold services there anymore. Why? Because I'm assuming that they built the synagogue around prayer, around just tefillah. And just tefillah cannot get a nation to continue. It has to be coupled with something else. And therefore, the reason why the Satan didn't attack Yitzchak is because he didn't feel threatened by Yitzchak. You could pray all day long, but it's not going to make your nation to continue. And therefore, there's no reason for me to attack Avraham, no reason for me to attack Yitzchak. What I need to attack is Yaakov, because what Yaakov represents Torah. And the Torah is what? Yes?
How about tefillin?
Again, it's very nice. Hazaku Baruch. It's great. But if a person goes ahead, and you see it even today, you see that there are plenty of fathers that are makpir on the tefillin, right? You could rap all day long. But if you don't, their fathers could be attached to tefillin, but unfortunately what happens to the children, they're not so attached. And therefore, the Satan does not get threatened not by Abraham and not by Yitzchak, but he's threatened by Yaakov, because Yaakov represents Torah. And Torah is something that only Torah can keep our nation going. If you don't constantly, And Chinami, you're right. But I'm talking about exclusive. What is exclusive to Am Yisrael? And by the way, going back to Yitzchak also, there's plenty of Jewish people that are they don't consider themselves Orthodox, and they pray. They pray plenty. But what do you see by those sections of Judaism that they have their, quote unquote, they have their temples and they have their tremendous synagogues, but they have their services, exactly. But what happens to that section in Judaism? It slowly dissipates. You could say to me that the Reform and the Conservative, they had very big numbers a long time ago. 100 years ago, Reform and Conservative, they have tremendous amount of numbers. But since their goal was only to say, listen, we just want people in the temple once a week, and hopefully that's going to have their connection. But nowadays, the Reform and the Conservative movement, it's dying. Why is it dying? Because they said to themselves, we're going to build our religion, our beliefs on prayer alone. On prayer and on chesed alone, a nation cannot continue. And therefore, they completely eradicated Torah, real, authentic Torah Judaism, from the Reform and Conservative movement. And you see slowly, they're dying out. The only thing that can keep our nation running, Chaim, is Torah. And that's the biggest proof. Because the Reform and becomes the Conservative, because they ostracized, because they kept Torah by the door and they said this will not come into our beliefs, and that's why they're slowly dying. And Torah is exclusive only to Am Yisrael. Nobody else has that. The Goyim, they have Chesed. The Goyim, they have Tefillah, but they do not have Torah. That's not the only thing they don't have, and that we could claim is exclusively ours. They have a different version, but that version will not. Again, which they don't really study. For them, yeah.
I heard that Tehillim is more important than Torah. That's why.
I mean, it's learning, but just reading it won't help you.
Low level.
Yeah, it could be. If you have nothing else to do, read. If you have nothing else to do, read Tehillim. But if a person has an option to learn or to read Tehillim and he knows how to learn, no doubt in my mind. But yeah, everybody should have a certain time of day what he dedicates towards Tehillim reading. But if you have an option to learn or to read Tehillim, to learn all day, to read Tehillim all day, there's no doubt in my mind that a person should be learning. Again, that's why, by the way, that's why we read every single day in Tefillah. What do we say? We say, B'zacharti et briti Yaakov, v'af et briti Yitzchak, v'af et briti Avraham. If you ask me, it's out of order. It should say Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Why does it say Yaakov first? Yaakov first because Yaakov represents Torah. And in Hashem's eyes, since Yaakov represents Torah, he spent 77 years of his life learning before he even got married. Therefore, that tells me that he represents Titain Emet Yaakov. Emet is the Torah. That's God's stamp. God's signet is Emet, which is the Torah itself. Moshe emet v'Torah emet. So therefore, Torah is emet, Yaakov is emet. So therefore, it's Zahati first, et briti Yaakov. That's why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot says, Al shlosha devarim ha'olam omed. What does it say? Al Torah ve'al avodah ve'al gimulut hasadim. Again, it's backwards. It should say gimulut hasadim, which is Avraham, then Tefillah, which is Yitzchak, and then Torah, which is Yaakov. The answer is because God, or the arranger of this Mishnah, he said, is going in order of importance. It's Ashlosha Devrim Ha'olam Omed. What's more important than everything is Torah first. After you have Torah, and then you have Tefillah, then you have Gimul Hasadim. Meaning to say that God is telling you that if you want to know something that keeps our nation always together, it's always the fact that you have to have learning. And it's unfortunate that our enemies, they know this more than we do. The Satan knew that as long as I attack Yaakov, if I could somehow figure out a way how to beat Yaakov, that means that I have destroyed not Yaakov. Yes, I did. I destroyed the person Yaakov, but I destroyed what he represents. Right? Yaakov, he represents Torah. So therefore, as long as the Satan could say to himself, I could destroy Yaakov, it's something that our enemies, they know more than us. If I could destroy Yaakov, that means I could destroy Torah. Once I destroy Torah, then I destroy Judaism. You're right, Zohar, that you said, because Yaakov was the 12 Shvatim. But the 12 Shvatim are not going to exist without learning. If you don't, as long as there's no learning inside your daily activity, then the nation will be wiped out. In fact, I saw a fascinating letter. Anybody know who Rabbi Moshe Sherer was? Moshe Sherer was the president of the Agudat Yisrael, and he passed away in 1998. And I heard a story about him that he used to carry in his wallet. He used to carry a letter that was written by one of the biggest Nazis at the time of, I forgot who it was. I have the letter actually with me over here. It says, I want to read to you inside because it's a tremendous letter. He says over here, he says, in a memorandum sent October 25th, 1940, by the chief of the German occupation power, Eckhart was his name, Yamach Shemo, to the local Nazi district governors in occupied Poland, instructing German immigration officials to refuse exit visas to the Ostjuden, Jews of Eastern Europe. Why did he want to refuse exit visas? And he says, Eckhart explains that these Jews have an Orthodoxen Entstellung. What does that mean? And they will become the Rabbinier und Talmuderhers. Specific Jews that Eckhart Yamach Shemo was targeting, that he didn't want them to leave Europe, was the Jews who studied Talmud. Why did he want to do that? He writes, needed by America and world Jewry to what's called Die Gesting Untergrund. What does that mean? Spiritual revival. He knew that as long as Orthodox Jewry exists, that means the Jewish people could continue living. Because why? Because they will be the spiritual revival of wherever they go. And as long as we could stop as what he calls the Rabbiner und Talmudhers, the people who study Talmud, then we're guaranteed that the Jewish people will die out. So it turns out like exactly what the Satan knew. The Satan said, if I could destroy Yaakov, I destroy Jews. Eckhart Yamach Shemo said the same thing. As long as I could destroy the Talmuders, if I could destroy the people who study Talmud, therefore there's not going to be any more spiritual revival. In discussing this man Doram, the late president of Agudat Yisrael of America, Rabbi Moshe Sherer of blessed memory, said the following. Think of it. The Nazis were carrying on a world war, pursuing military and political hegemony over all of Europe and beyond, fighting the mighty armies of the free world. Yet their concerns were focused on die Rabbiner und Talmudher. They were fighting they were fighting everybody, fighting England, fighting America, fighting Russia. But what they cared about the Orthodox Jewry. They feared the Orthodox the most because they saw in Orthodox the source of spiritual regeneration in the world. The answer to their final solution. Eckhart's insight was accurate. Today proves his point. Jewish life is being revitalized because of Jewish education, because of Torah Judaism. Here in Germany, even in Germany himself, the ones who are responsible for the spiritual revival are the Rabbinier in Talmuders, are those who study Talmud. And therefore something that our enemies understand more than us, but the lesson that we don't yet understand is how important it is the Jewish education that we're supposed to have, that we're supposed to give our children. If a person wants to know what is the best type of chinuch that I could give my children, it's the chinuch of as long as they're learning. Because the more they learn, the more that they continue, the more that we give them this constant hizuk, this constant inspiration, this constant backing them, the fact that they have to spend as much time as they can in Jewish education, because that is what keeps our nation going. So yes, indeed, says Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, the answer to this question is, why didn't the Satan attack Abraham? Why didn't he attack Yitzchak? Why did he specifically go for Yaakov? Is because he said to himself, a nation cannot exist just based on Hesed alone. It cannot exist just based on Tefillah alone. You have to have Torah in the mixture. And as long as Torah is there, that's what keeps the nation going. So therefore, Rabotai, I say, and I understand I'm ending a little early, but that is the lesson of the day. If a person wants to know what keeps our nation spiritually going, is only the Torah. The more Torah that you learn, the more it guarantees the success of Am Yisrael. So therefore, a person should be extremely, extremely flattered, because when he says to himself, listen, I'm sitting in front of a book. What possibly could a book do for my religion? The answer is that you studying is the spiritual reviver, 100%. If I learned anything from this entire shiur, this letter for me is so powerful. It's so powerful because it's something that even our enemy, somebody that, Yamach Shemo, this guy, who knows what kind of evil was going on in his heart. But he taught me a tremendous lesson. He taught that as long as a person is dedicated to the book, as long as a person is dedicated to Jewish education and real Torah learning, he is the spiritual revival of the nation. As long as you have that, again, if it was because those Jews survived Eastern Europe, because they came to America and slowly but surely they began to rebuild Torah, Torah is what kept our nation going. As long as we have that, as long as we continue investing our time and our money. And by the way, I just want to end with this point. The Satan was indeed successful in a certain way. How did I begin the class? The Satan hit Yaakov where? He hit him where? In the Gedanashe, in the thigh. What does the thigh represent in Judaism? The Rambam Mipano writes that bara karei da'avhu, that what is a person's legs? A person's legs is represented by his children. Because it's the children that carry a person into the next life. After a person retires after 120 and he passes away, he goes up to Shamayim. What keeps him active in Shamayim? It's his children. As long as a person has built a zechut for himself, it's his children that become, so to speak, his spiritual legs. It's the children that carry him into the next world and allow him to continue moving up levels in Shamayim. So therefore it turns out that a person's legs is his children. So therefore, the hit the Satan gave Yaakov, they hit him in the legs, which represent it hit his children. Because the Satan, he tries to get the children of a person not to learn. And that's the key. The key is, the more that a person teaches his children, you're trying to tell the Satan that whatever you tried to do, whatever your plan was, if you couldn't attack Yaakov, if you couldn't attack the person, he went for the children instead. And that's why we see it today, that the children are so distracted. That's why the children are so distracted with everything that goes on, especially in the world of technology. Like I said many times, in his name, the Samech Mem is the social media. That's Samech Mem, that's SM, social media, that's what it stands for, because he found a way to destroy Am Yisrael. That Gitanashe, the fact that he hit the legs, he hit the children, he hit the spiritual makeup of a person, and he said to himself, if I could get the children, that means that Torah makeup will be completely destroyed. And therefore, that's why it's so hard to get our children to focus. That's why it's so hard. I was talking to one of the principals of one of the high schools, and he said that he's been a principal for 35 years. And he said that if I could make a comparison to where the kids were holding 30 years ago when I was accepting kids into high school to the kids I'm accepting today, he said it's shamayim va'aretz. It's day and night. How much they knew then and how much they knew now, the amount that they know now, it's pathetic, he writes. It's pathetic because it should be the opposite. We have so much technology. We have so much more knowledge in Torah learning because we have so many more teachers and everybody's so much more religious than they were 30 years ago, but still, since there's so many distractions, and those distractions are there in order to destroy our children. That's why he said, since today, it's so much distracting. It's always about who has the better technology, and who's going on the better vacation, and who watches the more TV shows, and who's following the best sports teams. That is there in order to destroy our children. That is the Satan metaphorically hitting our Gita Nashe. It's there to distract the children. And once the children are distracted, that's when the Satan his plan has gone into motion that destroys Am Yisrael. And therefore I say, Rabotai, that besides the fact that it gives ourselves personal chizuk, the fact that the more word learning we do, the more that we are revitalizing our nation. But besides that, how much will we have to focus on our children? You have to tell your children as much as you can, keep them away from the shtuyot. Because the more you keep them away and the more they're involved in what's more important, that's all the more so you're destroying the Satan, the plan he meant to give. So therefore, Rabotai, I bless everybody here, B'ezrat Hashem, that Titene Med Yaakov, B'ezrat Hashem. Hi, Titene Med Yaakov. And the more we invest in our kids, the more investment we're going to get back. Wishing everybody here Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi